The issue of corporate management of climate risk has been increasingly on the public radar. And we're going to be talking to Carol Hansell, who's a senior partner of Hansell LLP, about a legal opinion she recently authored that says corporate directors have responsibility to basically manage or have managed corporate climate risk within on the boards that they sit on. So welcome to the interview, Carol.
Thank you very much, Mark. I'm pleased to be here.
Now, this is a really, really important issue, and I find it fascinating how over the last 3 years, the finance and corporate governance has done a lot to drive adaptations and responses to climate risk, and that your opinion, I think, fits squarely in that trend. Can you give us an overview of the opinion, please?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So it's important first to note that the law has not changed. The issue, I think, that that allows the climate change risk issue to rise to the level of saying, look, directors need to look at this, is the degree to which climate change and climate change risk have been researched, documented, and publicized. So when you look at the extensive work that has been done by the UN and UN-based organizations, the attention that's been paid to it by governments at all levels, the central bankers who have said, look, this is a serious issue for financial stability, the investment community that has been paying attention to this issue for so many years, it would be very difficult for a director to say, I'm not really aware of climate change risk. So the fact that the issue is so squarely on the table makes it very difficult for directors to say, well, we're simply not going to deal with the issue.
Now, I'll give you a concrete example. So I was interviewing Suncor, which is Canada's largest integrated oil and gas company. And they told me the story about how in 2016, an investor at their AGM put a motion on the table and said, look, we need to begin addressing climate risk, and we need to have an annual report, and we need to have a strategy, and we need to have data, and all of that stuff. And they adopted that, and then annually now they put out a separate report around how the company is maintaining climate risk. And I assume that some version of that process is what you have in mind in terms of directors of boards exercising their responsibility around climate risk.
So I think there are two issues. I think the issue that you're focusing on with that question is the disclosure issue. What are you telling investors? Which is a very, very important issue. The first issue, though, is what are you doing about it? Even if there is no disclosure, what is it you're doing about it? And that's really the part of the problem that we're addressing squarely in the opinion. That directors, whether they are managing the corporation, which they may be in smaller organizations or in large organizations where they're playing an oversight function, they have the statutory duty of care compels them to consider climate change risk, and determine whether action needs to be taken by the corporation.
Yeah, this is has been put on the public agenda to an even greater extent by the CEO of BlackRock Inc., the world's largest asset manager. Larry Fink sent out a letter to CEOs in January, and he basically said capital is now being reallocated on the basis of climate risk. And so that's got to play, I would think, a big role in motivating directors to pay more attention to this.
But that's a very serious issue, because you very often hear that when investment decisions are being made, there is a directive that's come from the top of the organization to say, look, unless we understand how climate change risk is being managed in the corporation, we're not investing. And so that takes some of the ability away from the PMs to be able to make decisions based on factors other than based on financial factors primarily, but other than climate change risk. So I think you're right about that.
So let's say that we're sitting on a board, and this comes up for discussion, and the board gives direction to management. Management doesn't maybe do as thorough a job as it should have, and eventually this becomes an issue for shareholders. what kind of liability do directors have to make sure that management does in fact follow through and do what it's supposed to do?
So I'm never very keen on looking at the job of directors solely through a liability lens, although I understand it's a question that people often ask. So if we can take that in two parts. So first of all, the main thrust of the opinion is to say, look, your duty of care, which is a statutory duty, requires you to take a look at climate change risk and the effect that it has on the organization. So if the directors completely fail in that regard, then action can be taken by the corporation or by people on behalf of the corporation to say, look, you failed in your duty, and we're now taking action against you. So there is personal liability that can flow in that regard. The other main area where I think there's exposure for directors is on the disclosure side. So again, I think it's important to distinguish between the doing side and the disclosing what you're doing side. But disclosure obligations are, for public companies, are hardwired into the Securities Act, and it's a legal question. So if the disclosure is not consistent with legal standards, directors can have personal liability for that.
Final question, Carol. I understand that already your opinion is having some impact at the corporate level, and it's being widely read and is becoming kind of a guideline for directors. Do you expect that to spread across the corporate community in Canada over the next little while? I gather that directors can't tarry on this.
Can't?
Tarry, they can't delay, they can't go slowly. They have to move on making sure that they're exercising their duty of care, and your opinion is being used as kind of a guideline for them.
I think that's right. So that again, so the duty of care is not new. The legal standard is not new. I think what is new in this opinion is to say, look, climate change is such a clear, present, imminent risk. How can you not be looking at it? And if the answer is, well, what's our obligation to look at it? Your obligation is the duty of care in the corporate statute.
Excellent. Carol, thank you very much for this. Really appreciate it. And
my complete pleasure.
Given the seriousness of this and the public attention that's being paid, I no doubt we'll be chatting about it again.
I look forward to it. Thanks so much.